For episode 6, it's a three-part story, so let's begin with part 1. It's December 7th of 1985, and it's a big night for Jim because thanks to her, she not only wins the movie deal, but Jericho's in control of Starlight Music and has owned the Starlight Music, which is formerly known as the Sands Manor. And that's when Jericho, who met up with Kimber later to discuss some news with Jim. So Jericho changes into Jim and meets up in the bedroom with the Countess, who has clothes for her. So after Jim tries on the new dress, she seems impressed with the Countess. And that's when she met everybody else in the living room, where everyone is having a good time, just like everybody would. And that's when Mrs. Bailey approaches Jim to say she has some news for Jericho. After Jim changed into Jericho, both she and Mrs. Bailey head to the TV room where all the Starlight girls were. And that's when Mrs. Bailey has some issues to discuss with Jericho about Ba-nee, who was 8 years old. It was revealed that her mother had since died of childbirth issues, and her father at the time was MIA. And on top of that, even worse is that Bonnie is facing some serious medical issues. So, meanwhile, then, long story short, after having a chat with Mrs. Bailey, Jericho talks to Synergy for a while, hoping she's not wearing her out or anything. And that's when she changed it to Jim, and that's when Jim meets up with Vivian Montgomery, aka Video for short, and both of them became best friends. And that's when Layla, the oldest of the Starlight Girls, wanted to tell Jericho that there's a problem in the kitchen and that the kitchen is low on ice. So Jericho, after she changed from Jim, to let Becky handle it, and so she was alone with Rio, Jericho that is, to talk to each other outside. And that's when Rio tells Jericho, you need to take it easy and let the Starlight Girls handle it. Plus, on top of that, Rio tells Jericho that he has feelings for Jim when at the Gabor estate, since the Misfits' defeat in the last episode, well, possessed of the Misfits were not exactly happy about it, and now the Misfits are planning revenge. And how, you may ask? Well, Roxy at the Misfits just came up with a suggestion that if they had the money, they would have had the studio right about now. And that's when Possessed, who follows Roxy's suggestion, went to discuss it with her father, Harvey Gabor. Well, Harvey is not only a businessman, but he's also rich. So Pizzazz had to persuade her father that she must have a studio of her own and she knows just the guy to run it. So Harvey reluctantly agrees to do just that. So, December 8th of 1985, the very next day, the holograms had arrived to meet up with Howard at the World Studio that is also owned by Harvey Gabor. And that's when, by surprise, they saw Eric inside the office to discuss some issues. He also said that as planned, the holograms must report to Studio 20, and of course there's a new script. Well, Jim's not exactly happy about it and then told Eric that she refused to give in to his ruthless methods. But aha! Eric said that he's found a loophole that it is according to the contract that was signed by her that says, and I quote, that if she fails to perform, then that means the mistress will gain control of the movie. Well, not just that, Eric also said that the movie will make the mistress famous. After the girls thought about it and discussed it with Howard, and they realized that what Eric said was true. So now they relentlessly realized that they had no choice. So Jim says, all right, fine, but nobody's taking that movie away from me. So that's what happened the very next day on December 9th of 1985 when they arrived as planned. Inside Studio 20, Anthony got upset with Eric about the script's change and he's not happy about it. So even though Eric says, well, you may be the director, but I'm in charge. Also, as planned, by the time that the holograms arrived, they were to report to the makeup room immediately, according to Eric. And so that's what the holograms did, only to find out that the misses were there first. After the Misfits were finished, it's now the holograms' turn, and that's when they met up with Georgia, who's the makeup artist, and that's when Jim refused to have any makeup from her. After the makeup job, that's when Kimber got caught by Jeff, who's a stuntman. Now, later on in the series, Kimber will soon change her mind about marrying him, and that's when the other guy that passed Kimber by was Nick. And as you may have guessed it, Nick was busy talking to Jim as Jim was reading the script. And that's when once again Possessed tries to make a move on Rio. When minutes later, Video's cousin Constance, or Clash for short, shows up on the set and with a little help from her cousin's past. And that's when Clash said to the Misfits what a big fan she is of them, and of course Possessed seems impressed with her. Jim, meanwhile, gets annoyed by the sound of the cymbals that Clash makes, and when Anthony too have heard it, he asks Clash to leave, but Pizzazz makes her case to say that Clash is their friend, so that means she's staying. So that's when Anthony got enraged and then told Pizzazz, and in that case, you can leave. And that's when Eric shows up, and he gets upset with Anthony for stepping out of line. Well, that did it. For Anthony, it was the last straw, and so he told Eric that he's quitting on the spot, and so he left. That gives Eric a chance to direct the film for the change, and then when the crew overheard it, that means the studio's in a serious downfall, but that would come later. So back at Starlight Mansion, Jericho just got some good news from Mrs. Bailey that Bonnie's having an appointment with the optometrist. As Jericho goes upstairs to meet with the girls, she told them to cheer up and that things would be better in the morning. So December 10th of 1985, the very next day, after Jim's video of jealousy that went as planned, that's when Rio punched Nick for kissing Jim. And when Eric saw it, he got upset and ordered him off the set. Pizzazz, however, was honorable enough to defend Rio by telling Eric that if he does that and gives Eric a choice to either have Rio stay on or she'll tell her father. And that made Eric upset. December 11th, 1985, the very next day, that's when the press conference came. And that's when Lindsay and the rest of the press crews were talking to everyone. Anyway, Miguel just pleaded his case with Eric to say that they're a day behind already, when meanwhile, after that, Eric has a discussion to make with Kimber to act out with Nick. To humiliate Rio, that's when Pizzazz has everybody see the billboard so that everyone can see it. And when Rio tries to convince Jim otherwise, that's when he walked off. Meanwhile, Eric was talking to Lindsay by saying it's true that Anthony did quit on the spot, but he's directing the film now, and he has Miguel to assist him in it. Howard, meanwhile, decided to take matters in his own hands with Harvey Gabor to say that there's a problem at the studio and that Eric has been costing the studio a lot of money, but Harvey dismisses him by saying if it makes his daughter happy, then so be it. Back at the studio, just when the holograms were about to perform, but then Eric suggested that the Misfits should perform instead with their song Universal Appeal. So after the Universal Appeal video for Jim, it was the last straw, and she got fed up with all the bullying that the Misfits did with her and the band. So what Jim did is that she uses the star prop to shove Pizzazz, and when Eric saw what had happened, he got upset and he's asking Jim, "How dare you do this?" And that's when Jim tells Eric that she had reached her limit, so she and the girls agreed to quit right on the spot. And then after they left, they caught up with Video, who met them there. Back with the Misfits, they're overjoyed now that the holograms are gone. That gives them the chance to take over. When Ba-nee, whom she met up with the optometrist later with Jericho, who's also there, that's when the optometrist gave Jericho the bad news. Ba-nee of the Starlight Girls has cataracts, and to make matters worse, it's an eye condition that will leave her permanently blind. For Jericho, that is indeed the bad news, and that ends episode 6.